What do these three things have in common? The Kompressa, Rhino Deathwatch skin, a Hercules beetle? The answer? Pretty strong bugs. I'm TheKengineer, let's solve a practical problem. Much of the testing of Kompressa happened live on stream. Join in future streams for the research, the giveaways, and the overall shenanigans. This nifty little weapon recently got a prime upgrade. Functionally though, it is still just the Kompressa. It has 10 points more critical chance, 6 points more status chance on direct hits, about 9% more AoE damage, and about 16% more AoE radius. In terms of stat boosts, these aren't that significant. While the critical chance is a lot higher than before, it's still on the lower end and paired with a below average 1.8 times critical damage modifier. As with all new primes, Riven users will have substantially lower stats to work with. However, if you take all of the stats in the arsenal at face value, you would be deceived. It does not have 36% status chance on the AoE. Despite no visible update, Prime Fulmination does increase the AoE radius. Suppress being equipped doesn't make the weapon silent, as it already is silent, serving only to allow Avara to retain her invisibility when firing Kompressa. Damage fall-off at maximum range is definitely higher than 20%. As for damage/S fall-off, I have no idea what that is supposed to mean. It certainly doesn't reduce damage over time effects. Suffice to say, this is one of those weapons where you need to know it to understand it. You can't just look at it. Kompressa fires a spread of viral bubbles which explode either shortly after impact or travelling their maximum range. With normal projectile speed, that maximum range is about 55 meters, with some variance. The direct hits work as described, nothing unusual there. The explosions, however, don't have a 36% status chance, nor 30% as stated on the normal Kompressa. From testing, both the normal and prime weapons have 120% status chance on their explosions. This means we have some exceptionally high status output. At base with a 4 multi-shot, 3.33 fire rate, 36% direct status, and 120% explosion status, the Kompressa Prime can deliver 20 status procs per second to a direct target before mods. All nearby enemies take 16 per second from the explosions alone. With normal fire rate, multi-shot, and status modding, this only gets more ridiculous. The 2.8 meter AoE is very small, but also helps to make up for the spread of the bubble shots. By including Prime Fulmination, this extends to just over 4 meters. While still not a huge area, this extends the damage to more comfortably cover clusters of enemies, especially in choke points. It also increases the damage that enemies within the default radius would take by extending the fall-off curve. From my own testing, fall-off at max range is at least 30%, possibly even 40%, sometimes rolling half damage again, likely due to body part multipliers. What this all comes to is a weapon capable of glorious bursts of status delivery and innate viral to immediately assure you maximize the single most powerful status effect in the game. Due to low critical stats, my first instinct will be to make this deal damage as a status focused weapon. However, such an approach comes with some limits and issues. A status focus would benefit greatly from faction damage buffs, except we have no primed Murmur faction mod, and no faction mods for Skuldra, Tekrot, Sentience, Thrax, or Acolytes, missing out on some of the strongest enemies we face. Many enemies are also resistant to status effects, immune to viral effects, or have an explicit weakness to critical hits. To strike a more reliable middle ground, a hybrid approach would prove more effective. It also wouldn't demand the switching of faction mods, and you can confidently lean into the ever-reliable heat viral combo. With this modding, the damage per second from explosions averages to 164,757, ignoring fall-off. It also applies 160 status per second from explosions, about 2/3 of them being heat. But this doesn't do Kompressa justice. Sure, this setup kills, but such an odd weapon can make use of odd choices far more uniquely. Cascadia Empowered is a simple arcane, dealing 750 damage flat to a target every time you apply any status effect with your secondary weapon. The type matches the effect with no cooldown, but also no modded scaling from the gun itself, except for faction mods. For this, you'll want to maximize status output at the expense of basically everything else. Status chance, multi-shot, and optionally fire rate if your ammo economy can handle it. This particular setup achieves just that, with prime fulmination to hit the greatest area. While fully stacked and aiming, this delivers 459 status effects per second from the explosions, and that's applied per enemy with zero worry about falloff. At 750 damage per status effect, that's 344,250 damage per second from the arcane alone. Such status output also means you'll have all the viral, corrosive and heat you could possibly need. Optionally, swap out Embedded Catalyzer for Magnetic Might, sacrificing some status chance to have Magnetic for dealing with shields and overguard too, or to avoid needing to aim and cast as part of your shooting. While this drops down to 276,750 damage per second, a 20% drop, the damage against overguard and shields will be over 3 times stronger. The weapon damage of Kompressa Prime fired this way is low though. The explosions average only 12,000 DPS, or 16,000 with Magnetic Bite. The majority of damage is from Cascadia Empowered when used this way. On the plus side, this has higher direct DPS than the basic hybrid setup, while also delivering a wider spread of useful status effects to enhance that output. The damage is applied fully to the whole explosive area and bypassing status caps by way of direct damage on triggered status. However, there are downsides. The damage is much harder to buff as any pure damage, critical and elemental bonuses from companions or abilities will only buff the much lower weapon damage. Eclipse and Amp, for example, have no effect on Empowered. Raw, however, will boost the damage, and Prismatic Gem will boost status chance. On top of the difficulty buffing the damage, it's all non-critical, meaning it suffers the worst reduction against some forms of damage capping or attenuation, like with Acolytes. The setup is useless against status immune targets, or weaker against targets immune to specific status types like Viral, again a problem against Acolytes. Further still, the arcane hits will never hit the head, avoiding any damage bonuses there too, and not triggering anything that relies on headshots or headshot kills. Also, the status effects from this setup are all low damage. While the highest on-paper DPS is over 350,000 compared to the basic hybrid setup's 165,000, the hybrid setup's 160 status per second will include over 100 heat procs per second. Enhanced by Pistol Elementalist, those will each deliver 95% of the triggering hits damage again every tick, applying around another 219,000 paper damage per second. While this is mitigated by Falloff, any hardy enemies without some kind of status resistance will die just as fast or faster to the hybrid build. Cascadia Empowered works, but there are a lot of caps on its higher level scaling. Thanks to new arcanes introduced though, the options we can indulge in with our weapons continue to expand. Despite Kompressa being a clearly status focused weapon, it is possible to make it a critical monster too. This is made real by Secondary Enervate. Secondary Enervate applies a 10% final critical chance bonus with every hit. Once the weapon applies 6 hits of orange or greater, the bonus resets to 0. More correctly, when 6 different shots, not counting multi-shot, trigger orange or greater crits is when it resets. Usually, the arcane only stacks up once per shot too. A majority of weapons will just hit the enemy with their shot and be done with it. Normal usage means you shoot, trigger, and repeat. This makes it nearly impossible to land a red crit from Enervate alone. Kompressa doesn't follow these rules. The direct hit counts as its own hit, and each explosion counts separately unless it coincides with another explosion. Due to Kompressa's explosions having a variable delay, a single fired shot can trigger the arcane many times over. In practice, it's often 4 triggers with unmodified multi-shot, 6 to 10 times with high multi-shot. Further still, the critical chance is determined when the shot is fired. Shots in transit won't affect the arcane, only stacking or resetting it when they actually trigger. Shots fired while others are in transit can use the same or potentially higher buffs. This combination of multiple triggers per shot, low base critical chance, distinct travel time, and explosion delay means Kompressa can be ridiculous. Say you've got a fire rate of 5.33 from Lethal Torrent. This means 5 shots can be fired in under 1 second. Including travel time and explosion delay, the 5th shot can be fired before the first one has exploded. In total, the 5th shot has left the weapon with maybe 10 or 20% higher critical chance from the first couple direct hits landing. All 5 of these shots land and explode. None of them are capable of orange crits, so it's just 5 shots delivering 8 triggers apiece. Secondary Enervate would be at 40 stacks or 400% critical chance bonus. You then fire 5 more shots. Each of these has this ludicrously high bonus. They're guaranteed to not simply red crit, but to second tier red crit with a chance of a third tier red crit. By the time you're firing the 5th shot, the first couple will have landed, but again, likely not yet exploded. All of the bonus is still available. Finally, the explosions catch up. Dozens of bubbles burst, with critical bonuses being applied 4 or more times over. The damage output far exceeds what the weapon is normally capable of. The first explosions will hit enough times to instantly clear the Enervate bonus, and the following explosions will rapidly go through a cycle of charging to 50%, then resetting, as you repeat the 6 higher tier crits in quick succession. All the while, you can keep firing and reloading, a constant flow between white, yellow, orange and red hits. We can take a build nearly identical to the original hybrid setup, but replacing our critical chance mod with Hornet Strike and switching our arcane, swapping the roles of the mod and arcane. If we assume a normal weapons experience, where the critical power resets shortly into reaching orange crit territory, then the average output will be just below constant yellow crits, or approximately 90% critical chance. Estimating with that would give an average explosion DPS of only 140,000. But Kompressa, with its regular ability to climb into red and higher crits, averages closer to full orange crits, or 200% critical chance. At that tier, the damage per second, just from the explosions, averages 262,000. This damage is applied fully into the status effects too, allowing for strong damaging procs against more resilient targets. At the same 262k explosion damage output, the heat procs applied would carry another 331,000 damage per second. This gives it more direct DPS, and therefore more status DPS than the basic hybrid build, and usually more DPS than the Cascadia Empowered build. It is, out of the 3, the most reliable method to get power out of this gun. All 3 builds, however, struggle against Necromex. Doesn't matter what you do there with Kompressa, attenuation goes burr. At all times, the most broadly used ability buff will be Raw, either buffing Empowered when most things can't, or double dipping the incredible status damage output. Nothing else is this effective, be it viral subsumes and companion application, crit chance buffs, or fire rate buffs. Flat critical damage buffs, however, specifically Tenacious Bond, will do a lot of good work for Kompressa on the hybrid and Enervate builds. When using the hybrid and especially Enervate builds, the damage output at times can be enough to score headshot kills. Where you can manage that, Arcane Pistolier can be used to get bottomless clip for a short period of time. When that triggers, just hold down the fire button and paint the map. Plus, it goes without saying that the mecha set, as ever, loves supporting status damage weapons. Lastly with Kompressa is its unique and hidden synergy with Eurali's Surging Blades Augment. This allows a compressor bubble to capture the blade. Rather than vanishing with its explosion, the bubble lingers for a while to create a tiny damaging zone for hapless enemies to walk into. I'll be quite honest, having tried it for both damage and for cool factor purposes, I can confidently say it fails to deliver on both. Stick to using the Kompressa for itself. This new prime hasn't fallen far from the tree, but with just enough buffs that it's still better than the original, unless you have an ideal ribbon for it. Whether you go for a typical hybrid approach, an empowered approach, or an Enervate approach, it can get a lot of work done. Also, it doesn't require to farm Vent Kid Standing, which to most players is clearly the biggest buff of them all. Thank you to all channel supporters for helping to keep the guides coming, and as always, launch bubbles, cause trouble, and fight well, Tenno.